I have definitively concluded that the introverts come to the 9 a.m. and the extroverted people come to the 11, because y'all a little quiet. But no, we're thankful for you. Let's give our pastor a hand as he comes this morning.
Good morning. How you feel? It's not about how you feel. We walk by faith and not by sight. Sometimes we have to overcome how we feel in a moment and give him the praise he deserves. Sometimes we have to overcome how we feel in a moment and be obedient to what he's asked us to do. Sometimes we have to overcome how we feel in the middle of a storm in order to step out, in order to survive. The truth is, a large part of our Christian walk is just overcoming how we feel from moment to moment. And I know that you have the capability of doing that even if you don't feel well today. I know that you have the capability of walking by faith and not by sight. Are you ready for a word? Well, I'm ready to give one, so that works out. We're going to be in part 2 of the sermon series that we started last week, entitled Fruitless. Last week, I read from Mark chapter 11, and we're going to do the same this week. The next day, as they being Jesus and his disciples, were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Jesus was normal. He got tired. He cried. He got hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. Last week I told you that Jesus knew this fig tree didn't have any fruit. He didn't walk over to the fig tree for discovery. He walked over to the fig tree for discipleship. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves because it was not the season for figs. Typically, when fig trees have leaves, they have fruit. So this fig tree was giving the appearance of fruit. Even out of season, this fig tree was giving the appearance of fruit. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. Then verse 19 says, when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Withered from the roots. From this passage of Scripture, we conclude that when there's a lack of fruit, it's always a problem with the root. In the parable of the talents, we see this same principle play out. A man called for 3 servants, and to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. The word talent in this parable references a bag of gold or silver. So in essence, the master gave each servant a substantial amount of money. Think about how much you could earn, how much you could make in 20 years. I want you to get that number in your mind. Sure, it's going to be different for each and every one of us, but it's going to be a substantial amount. Think about how much money you could make in 20 years. That's how much 1 talent is worth. There's this initial tendency to feel sorry for the servant who received 1 talent because he didn't get as much as everyone else. That is until you realize how much 1 talent is. It's like when Donald Trump said that he started his business empire with a small loan from his dad, and then you realize that that small loan was $1 million. it changes the perception of the situation. When you find out one talent is 20 years worth of your salary, when you find out that small loan was $1 million, it sort of changes the perception of the situation. I think it's interesting that in this parable, the parable of the talents, the test wasn't surviving a struggle, but managing a blessing. The master tested the ability of each servant, not by handing them a sword and sending them out to battle, but by blessing them. Abraham Lincoln said, nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. How do you handle success, prosperity, blessings, influence? Do you separate from the Lord in a season of success? Do you pray less often, read less often when things are going according to plan? Do you show up to church less often when your salary is increasing or your business is growing? Do you have a tendency to distance yourself from the Lord when things are progressing and advancing? I think if we're honest, there's been seasons of our life where we've done just that. He answered our prayers, and then we put him on the back burner. And what that demonstrates is that we were more interested in the gift than the giver. The master blessed each servant with a substantial amount of money, and then he left and was gone for a long time. When the master finally returned, he called for all 3 servants. The first servant, to whom he had given 5 talents, had traded and gained 5 more. The second servant, to whom he had given 2 talents, had gained 2 more. And the master said to each of them, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Well done, good and faithful servant. But in that statement, the word faithful could be replaced with fruitful. The master was commending them not just for being honest, but for being fruitful. These 2 servants were a lot like my grandfather. He only had a 6th grade education, but he had the ability to take what he had, find someone who needed it, and trade until he ended up with more than he started with. It's not an exaggeration when I tell you he could take a car seat and turn it into a car. He could take a bullet and turn it into a gun. He could take a cheeseburger and turn it into a week's worth of groceries. I'm not sure how he did it, but he always had the ability to make you feel like you wanted what he had and you were willing to give what you had in order to gain what he had, even if what he had wasn't technically as valuable as what you had. These servants had that kind of ability. They could take 5 talents and turn it into 10. They could take 2 talents and turn it into 4. And the master commended them. And since the master commended them, from that we conclude that God judges you not based on what he gives you, but what you do with what he gives you. It's not the gift, but what we do with it that reveals who we are. The gift says more about the giver than it does the recipient. If I give you a car, it says more about me than it does about you. It says I'm compassionate. It says I'm generous. It says I'm loving. It doesn't say much about you other than maybe you need a car. Now, how you take care of that car, whether you clean that car, whether you change the oil in that car, that says something about who you are. It's not the gift, but what we do with it that reveals who we are. So even though this system of giving one servant 5 talents, another 2, and another 1 seems grossly unfair, it's not. Because everyone has the same opportunity to take what they've been given and use it in a way that brings glory to God. It doesn't matter whether you have $2 or $2 million. Well, I'm sure it matters to you. But when God analyzes and examines your life, it really doesn't matter whether you have $2 or $2 million. He's not looking at what he gave you. He's looking at what you do with what he gave you. This is why the widow who cast in her mites could give more than all the wealthy people who threw thousands or even millions of dollars into the offering plate. Because it's not about how much you give. It's about how much it cost you to give that amount. This is why tithing is a percentage. God's not trying to bring us to a place of equal giving. He's trying to bring us to a place of equal sacrifice. It's not about the amount. It's about how much it costs you to give that amount. It doesn't matter whether you're the most talented person in the room or whether you struggle to identify any talent that you possess. God's not looking at whether you can sing better than anyone else. He's not looking at whether you can speak better than anyone else. He's looking at what you did with what he gave you. So the first servant came and he said, Master, I've taken 5 talents and I've turned it into 10. The second servant came and said, Master, I've taken 2 talents and turned it into 4. Then the third servant who received 1 talent came. And look at what he said. Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. At the beginning, I told you that when there's a lack of fruit, there's always a problem with the root. It's always due to an issue that's taking place beneath the surface. And this is exactly what we see with the third servant. In verse 25, he says, I was afraid. Afraid of what? I was afraid I wouldn't measure up. I was afraid of the expectations that were being placed on me. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do what you wanted me to do. I was afraid that if I tried to use what you gave me, it wouldn't go well. I was afraid that I would screw it up. Being afraid that you're going to screw it up will keep you from ever trying. For example, how many times have you wanted to encourage someone? How many times have you wanted to witness to someone, but you didn't because you were afraid that you wouldn't know what to say? In almost every area of our life, when we're passionate about something and we believe deeply in it, we speak boldly about it. If you find a restaurant that you love, you tell people about it. If you buy a new pair of shoes that make your feet feel real good, you tell people about it. If you go on a vacation and everything just surpasses your expectations, you tell people about it. But then there are some areas that we build up in our mind, stimulating fear in our heart that paralyzes us and keeps us from even trying. Fear causes us to build things up in our mind and make them bigger than they are. We build up in our mind how difficult something is going to be, and then we become blind to how simple it really is. You've spent more time dreading the dishes than it would have taken to do them. You've spent more time dreading mowing the yard than it would have taken to just mow the yard. You sign up for opportunities and social gatherings and then spend all week dreading the opportunity and social gathering that you signed up for. But when you overcome that fear and make yourself go anyway, you actually have a good time. Fear causes us to build things up in our mind, making them bigger than they are or ever should be. And this is what happened with the third servant. Look at what the master said in verse 27. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers. Notice that the master considers it his money even though he placed it in the servant's hand. Do you look at what you have as his or yours? As far as this parable is concerned, the master considered it his even though he placed it in the servant's possession. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. This wasn't hard. The third servant convinced himself that this was bigger than it actually is, that it was harder than it actually was. If he had just deposited the money instead of digging a hole, he would have passed the test. Do you see how fear caused him to act illogically and overlook the simple solution to this situation? But we've got to dive deeper than that. What was the root cause of his fear? The root cause of his fear was his faulty perception of who the master was and what he wanted from him. The first words out of the servant's mouth was, "I knew you were a hard man." I knew. Well, he thought he knew, but we're going to see later on in the message that he didn't know what he thought he knew. He was operating under a false preconceived notion and assumption about who his master was and what his master wanted. And when you think about it, many of us are operating under preconceived notions and assumptions that we're confident in, but are going to turn out to be completely wrong. They don't want me around. I could never do that. That would never work out. It's not in the cards for me. I guess I'm just meant to live this way. I guess I'm just meant to be by myself. We're all operating under certain preconceived notions and assumptions that we have confidence in, but will most likely turn out to be wrong. He said, "I knew you were a hard man." In other words, I knew you were hard to please and eager to punish, so I was afraid. Look at John chapter 15, verse 5. "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." It is our sustained connection with Jesus that cultivates fruit in our life. But if we have a faulty perception about who he is and what he wants from us, we can't connect with him on a deep enough level. For example, if we believe that he's angry with us because of what happened in the past, if we believe that he's still ticked off because of the mistake we made 6 months ago, or because of the dead-end road we walked down 6 years ago, it interferes with our connection. If we believe that he wants us to do without, that he wants us to be miserable, that he wants us to suffer, it interferes with our connection. If we believe that he has set a standard that we can't live up to, that he's asking us to do something that we could not possibly do, it interferes with our connection. If we believe that all he cares about is what we accomplish and achieve, if we believe that all he cares about is the straight line that we walk, if we believe that all he cares about is the bottom line, it interferes with our connection. What is it that you think about Jesus that keeps you from connecting with him and cultivating fruit in your life? The third servant said, "I knew you were a hard man. I knew you were hard to please and eager to punish." But that wasn't the case. And if this servant had known his master, not just been acquainted with or affiliated with, but if this servant had known his master, he would have realized that all he had to do was what the master did. What did the master do? He took what was in his hand and placed it in the servant's hand with an expectation that it would increase. What should the servant have done? Taken what was in his hand and placed it in the banker's hand with the expectation that it would increase. Side note, this shows us how we increase in the kingdom of God. We increase by taking what's in our hand and investing it into other people. And when we invest it into other people, we end up blessed in the end, which is why Jesus said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. All the servant had to do was what he saw the master do. If he had done exactly what he saw his master do, he would have produced fruit. When I was growing up, they used to say, WWJD, what would Jesus do? But now, with all the confusion in church and all the false assumptions and all the inaccurate doctrine, what we really need to be asking ourselves is, WWRJD, what would the real Jesus do? Because there's a lot of fake ones out there. There are a lot of fake Jesuses that people have constructed in their mind, and they're trying to get other people to construct the same ideas in their mind. So we got to ask ourselves, what would the real Jesus do? The real Jesus wouldn't be motivated by money, because he always had a purpose, a goal that was bigger than money. The real Jesus did not allow other people to dictate how he acted. He was good to them even when they were not good to him. The real Jesus gave when people didn't deserve it, invested when people hadn't earned it. The real Jesus never gave off the appearance of significance. He could be lost in the crowd. He identified with everyone, sympathized with everyone. That's the real Jesus. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't someone who reigned above everyone else. He was one of us. He was one of us. That's the real Jesus. But the problem is, the third servant had a perception of his master that wasn't rooted in reality. And this kept him from connecting with his master in a way that would have cultivated fruit in his life. And you want to know what's sad? Most of the time when people have false perceptions about the God they serve, they got it from watching other people operate under their false perception about the God they serve. Which means when we misrepresent Jesus, we're not just communicating a message about him that isn't true. We're making it harder for other people to connect with him in a way that would cultivate fruit in their lives. This is why it's such a damaging thing when churches portray God as this spiteful, bitter, angry, wrathful, vengeful person. Because they're not just communicating a message about him that isn't true. They're making it harder for people to connect with him. When they act as if God would rather send you to hell than develop what's inside of you and lead you into becoming the best version of yourself, they're communicating a message that isn't true and making it harder for people to connect with him. See, this is why the third commandment says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Did you know that taking the Lord's name in vain has always been about much more than using his name as a form of profanity? It's not about the word you use. It's not about texting someone OMG. It's more than that. Think about it like this. On June 16th, 2007, Carrie Maiden was no more. Why? Because on that day, she became Carrie Shelton. When she took my name, she didn't just get a new driver's license or the $500 I had saved up in the bank or the keys to the single wide trailer I was renting from her uncle. I just turned 19. Give me a break. It's the best I could do. When Carrie took my name, she pledged her love and devotion to me and I to her. Now, if Carrie had come home from the wedding and signed up for farmersonly.com, she would have taken my name in vain. Meaning, she took my name, but that decision is not reflected in how she lives her life. You see, we take the Lord's name in vain when we call ourselves a Christian, but continually misrepresent what that name means and who Jesus is. When we do this, it's not just our lives that are affected. We are consciously or subconsciously communicating false ideas about Jesus that make it harder for other people to connect with Him and cultivate fruit in their lives. No, we're not perfect. But we should be desperately trying to live our lives in a way that reflects what it means to be a Christian, in a way that reflects who Jesus really is. Our conversations, our choices, the roads that we walk down, we should actively be trying to make sure that they reflect what it means to be a Christian and who Jesus is. So, all the way up to the end of this parable, things have seemed very practical. But then at the end, they take on an eternal significance. Look at what the master finally says about the third servant. So take the bag of gold, the talent, from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whosoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from him. Now that's bad. That's bad because, the third servant lost what he had, but it gets worse. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing. No, it's not gnashing. I know it looks that way, but it's gnashing of teeth. Do you know what weeping and gnashing of teeth represent? It's not a trick question. Anybody want to guess? Hell. So wait a minute. Did the third servant go to hell because he didn't use what he had been given? Did the third servant go to hell because he wasn't productive enough? Did the third servant go to hell because he didn't live a fruitful enough life? If so, what's that say about us? But the third servant didn't go to hell for any of those reasons. Why did he go to hell? Because he didn't know the master. He didn't know him. He was an acquaintance. He was affiliated with. But through his words and actions, we realize that he didn't know the master. He had this fake, fabricated version of his master that wasn't rooted in reality. Let me remind you once again, heaven and hell is about who you know. That's all. It's not about whether you produced enough. It's not about whether you worked hard enough. It's not about whether you were fruitful enough. It's about who you know. And if you know Jesus, all those other things will come because he said, I'm the vine and you're the branch. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. The third servant went to hell because although he claimed to know the master, he didn't. You It reminds you of one of the scariest passages of Scripture in the Bible where Jesus said, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? Have we not cast out devils in your name? Have we not done many wonderful works in your name? And then he'll say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. You could know about him, but that's not good enough. You got to know him. You can be affiliated with him, but that's not good enough. You got to know him. You can be an acquaintance, but that's not good enough. You got to know him. You got to know him. So now that we've answered the question about why the third servant ended up where he ended up, let's get real specific as we close out this sermon with what exactly a talent represents. Because it's not just money. Yes, it represents money on the surface, but it's got to be more than that, right? God's not just analyzing us based on what we do with our money, because if so, some of us are in trouble. We go through seasons where we're not good stewards of our money, right? So what is the primary context of a talent? What does it really represent? Well, let me ask you this question. What's the most valuable thing God has given to us and that he wants us to duplicate? What's the most valuable gift God has given us? His Son, and through his Son, we receive salvation. What's the most valuable thing God has given to us and he wants us to duplicate? Salvation. We've been given the gift of salvation, and through this parable, Jesus is communicating that he expects us to go out and share what he's given us with others so that what he did in our lives will permeate into their lives. So what are we supposed to be doing while we wait for the master to return? We're supposed to know Jesus and make Jesus known. You want to live a fruitful life? I'm going to make it real simple. Know Jesus and make Jesus known. You want to be pleasing to the Lord? Don't bog down your mind with rules and regulations. I'm going to make it real simple. Know Jesus and make Jesus known. That's how we live fruitful lives. But some of us are not doing that. Why are we not doing that? Because we're afraid. I'm afraid to speak up. I'm afraid to ask, can I pray for you? I'm afraid to give my coworker that Bible verse. What if they reject it? What if they don't respond well? What if they report me? I'm afraid. Fear causes us to build things up in our mind, making them bigger than they are. You know, I've done this for 17 years, if you count all my ministerial experience. You know how many people have turned me down when I ask, can I pray for you? Maybe 3, 4. Most people are fine with you praying for them. Matter of fact, most people welcome it because it shows that you care. It shows that you're interested in what's going on in their life. It shows genuine sympathy, genuine compassion. Can you know Jesus? Can you make him known? Or are you like that third servant, paralyzed by fear, digging in the ground and hiding that you're a Christian, hiding that you're saved, hiding that you know him because of what people might think, because of what people might say? As the worship team comes, I want to invite you to stand to your feet. I want to ask you, if you only judged your life based on knowing Jesus and making him known, how fruitful are you? Do you know that 95% of believers will never lead anyone to Jesus? That's a proven statistic. 95%. And why do you think 95% of believers will never lead anyone to Jesus? Because they're afraid. I'm afraid to try. I'm afraid that I won't have answers to their questions. I'm afraid that I won't be able to respond well. I'm afraid that I'll trip, that I'll stutter. So we don't try. I stutter all the time up here. You're human. You're going to stutter. You're going to mess it up. You're going to mess it up. I have put Noah in the wilderness and Moses on the ark. Sometimes you have that slip and you just mess up. But being afraid that you're going to screw it up will keep you from ever trying. So here's what I want you to do if you're a believer. I want you to have a conversation with Jesus about having the courage to try. Lord, I know I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I want to make an impact on the people around me. I want to bring hope to the hopeless. I want to shine a light in darkness. I want to be the salt of the earth. I want to be a city set on the hill that cannot be hid. I want my life to mean something even after I'm dead and gone. I don't want to meet you and then you ask me, what did you do with what I gave you? What did you do with what I invested in you? Did you tell anybody how I saved your marriage? How I delivered you? How I rescued you, how I never gave up on you, how I never turned you away, that when other people wrote you off, I was always by your side, that I was a friend that sticks closer than a brother, that I was your constant companion, that I was your ally through every season of turbulence and tribulation. Did you tell anybody what I did for you? So if you're here today and you're saved, I want to invite you right now to have a conversation with Jesus about finding the courage to try so that you can live a fruitful life. Go ahead right now. And if you're here today and you're lost, I want to invite you to call upon the name above all names, the name in which every knee shall bow. Do you know that? Did you know that? That you're going to bow to Jesus now or later, but every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. If you bow to Jesus and call out to him now, you can be saved. He's going to give you the best gift, and you're going to live a fruitful life. But if you wait until later, you'll still acknowledge him, you'll still recognize him, but you won't reap any of the benefits from it. So let's all corporately take a moment and have a conversation with Jesus right now, because one conversation with him can change our lives. Let's pray.